Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome back to part 3 of my Unreal Engine tutorial on how to build a music management component for your Unreal Engine. So let's just do a quick little recap. In part 1, we went ahead and defined our data structures as well as our components. So we have our music track, our playlist row of playlists, and then we defined our music component that we're going to use to manage our playlist as well as within our game. In part 2, we went ahead and integrated that component into our solution via a custom game instance, and then we set up our solution to use our custom game instance. So then in part 3, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a nice little UI so that when we're in the game, as you can see right here, if I press the M button, we can come in and we can change the music to whatever we want to play. So and that's it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get started. So I'm just going to move this over here onto my other screen real quick. Make sure it's out the way. And then we can get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go back into we're going to bring up our solution. I'm going to come into the content drawer and we're going to go ahead and start creating our widgets. So I'm going to come in and create a new folder. We'll call this one UI. We'll open it up and then we'll come down to user interface, widget blueprints. I'm just going to use a stock user widget for this one and we'll just click on that. Call this WBC. Yeah, we'll just call this WBC track, why not? Save, compile. So let's go ahead and define this component widget. So this is going to be our button in our list of buttons. So when we click on it, it will allow us to change the music. So to do that, let's go ahead and get a button. There we are. We'll drag you in. We will go ahead and I'm just going to set this to fill screen. So desired on screen. There it is. Compile and save. I'm just going to go ahead and change this name. There we go. I'm going to hit compile and save again. And let's go ahead and put a text in here. So we'll just drag and drop so we'll know which track this button is associated with. And since I'm making this a variable, I'll go ahead and set this up. Track name, and we'll make that a variable. White on gray is not really a great color, so we'll go ahead and change that to black. Hit save. I'm just going to put some default text. This will get overridden when we actually create the widgets. And I think we can keep everything else the same. Yeah, let's do that. So we have the button, we have the track name. I think the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to put a padding of 1 around the whole widget. That way it'll give us a little bit of spacing but when we start stacking them up in a list box. So let's go over to the graph and let's go ahead and put some code in here. So we don't need the event pre-construct and I don't need the event tick for this. So we'll just go ahead and do that. Compile, save, and we'll just come on over here. So let's get this set up. First thing, let's define some variables. So I'm going to say make this a variable a music track, and I'm going to set this to the music track that we defined in our C++ code. I'm going to go ahead and instance and make it instance editable, and I'm also going to set expose on spawn. Next, I'm going to add another variable, which is going to be track ID. And this is just going to be a name. And once again, instance editable, and expose on spawn. So let's go ahead and hook this all up. So track name, I'm just going to come over, say get, and I'm going to set the text. And then we're just going to take this variable here, which is our music. I'm just going to say, we're just going to go ahead and break it so we can get access to the data inside. I'm just going to put the name in there, and I'm just going to say, come over here and say hide pins that we're not using. Make things a little neater. Oops. Okay. Next, I'm just going to go grab the button. Actually, we're just going to click on the button, and then we're just going to create an on-click event for that button. And for this, we want to invoke a dispatcher. So I'm going to create a new event dispatcher called on track select. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a parameter. So we'll click on that. We'll call track ID, and again we'll make this the name. Compile, save. I'm just going to drag it over. I'm going to say call, and we'll just go ahead and drag the track ID and then just connect it. So what this will do is when we click on the button, it will then send a message back to whatever's listening to it, telling it that we clicked on the button with this track ID. So that will allow us to then execute the music in the parent class. Alright, so we've done that. Everything looks good. Let's go ahead and build our little music screen. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and set up a custom widget class in C++. That way I do these things so I can keep common logic in a single class, in a single place. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come down to C++ classes, go to public, and I'm going to go new C++. We're going to go all classes. I'm going to come to user widgets. Here's the user widget. I'm going to hit next. Public. We'll give this a name. Or that's a good name, core system user widget. And let's go ahead and put this in a different folder. UI. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the create button and let Unreal Editor and Visual Studio do their thing. And I'm going to go ahead and let it reload into the solution. Alright, and that's it. So next, let's go ahead and define this a little bit. So I'm going to create a little protected zone and a public zone, just to kind of set this up. So let's go ahead and dive into the protected zone first. And within that zone, so within that zone, we're just going to go ahead and define. I'm just going to go ahead and drop in the my game instance and the core music class, and I'm going to set that as a category of core, game instance, core system, both read-onlys, and just to make the compile, so the compiler can compile, we'll go ahead and include the include statements. So that will point to my game instance, and And then that should go to the core music system, and that should make everything happy again. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to override the on initialization function within the user widget. And so to do that, I'm going to, Unreal Engine's user widget has several functions that you have the option of overriding. I'm going to only do the native on initialized function, but if you want to, bring code, have additional things that you might want to do on, say, the pre-construct, the construct, the destruct, or the native tick, you can go ahead and just go ahead and override these as well. But for this demo, I'm just going to override the initialization. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to tell Visual Studio to go ahead and fix this. So what you'll do is we'll create a function. So within that function, first, whenever we override an Unreal Engine's objects function, we want to call the super, and then we want to tell it to override the native function, the native version of that function. Next, we'll go ahead and let's set up the game instance. So I'm going to say, for that, I'm just going to do a cast, and this will be done off get game instance. And then after that, we'll just go ahead and do an if statement to say if current game instance is valid, we get a valid pointer back. We'll then go ahead and say music system equals current game instance pointer get music system, just like that. And that's all we need to do here. So this will automatically go ahead and whatever screens we develop within our game that use the core system, it will always, we will always have access to both the current game instance as well as the music system if we need it. So I'm just going to save that, and let's go ahead and let it get compiled. So let's come back to the solution. Let's go ahead and run the compiler. It's a good compile. So let's go ahead and then create that parent screen. So we're going to come up here. We'll go, we're in the UI class folder. We're going to come down to user interface. We're going to come down to widget blueprints. And instead of using the widget blueprint, we'll go ahead and find that custom one which we created. And there it is, core system user widget. We'll go ahead and select that. Give it a name. And let's go ahead and start setting up, creating the layout for this screen. So for this layout, we're going to go ahead and add a canvas panel. So find the canvas panel right here. We're going to bring it down. And then off the canvas panel, I'm going to put a little blur effect. So I'm going to put a little background blur onto the canvas panel. So we'll set that background blur. I'm going to give it a strength of 5. And then we'll go ahead and set the anchors. So I'm going to have this, I want this blur to stretch out over the entire screen. So we're going to use this one out in the corner right here. So I'm going to hit the left shift key and I'm going to click on it. And then I'm going to go back onto anchors, and then I'm going to hit the left control key, and then that will set the background blur with a strength of 5 and put it right in the, have it sized to the right position. Hit compile and save. All right, so next up, I'm going to put a vertical box in place. So here's our vertical box. I'm going to move this down. I'm going to add that in. I'm going to give our vertical box a size of 400 on the X. Come on. 400. And on the Y we'll call it 600. So our Y is now 600. And then we'll set our anchors. I'm going to set this dead center. So left shift and click, and then left control and click, and it will go ahead and just perfectly center it for us on the screen, on the canvas panel. So now that that's there, we're going to go, I'm going to go ahead and add a scroll box to our screen. So I'm going to come down, we'll drag, we'll drop it on the vertical, so we'll add it inside. I'm going to make this a variable, and we'll give it a name. And there we go. All right, and so I don't think we really need to do too much with that. Horizontal, vertical alignment is good. I think everything else looks fine. And that's, I think, all we need to do here. So now we'll just go back to, we'll go into the graph and we'll set things up. So for this, again, I don't need the pre-construct and I don't need the tick. I just need the event construct. So in the native code in the back, that will handle the initialization. So I don't need to add a onInit event. We don't need to do that here because that's being handled in C++. So all we need to do is just go ahead and add our event construct code. So we can do that right here. So first off, let's go ahead and say, let's get the music component. And there it is, under core systems, get music. And I'm going to set this to a validated get to make sure that this component is valid. Okay, then next we're going to go ahead and grab our SB tracks, and I'm going to go ahead and clear the children. So we want to make sure that this box is clear before we go ahead and add anything to it. And then after this, we're going to go ahead and loop through the the playlist, right? And we're going to go ahead and then create those widget buttons. So to do that, we're going to go and drag off music system, and we're going to say get playlist, and here it is. And I'm going to set this to the playlist that I want, that I'm only interested in, that is the global list. So I'm going to do that. So in order to loop through, since this is a map, in order to loop through it, we need to first get the keys, and then we will then use the keys. As we're looping through the keys, we'll use that to do the actual find on the map. So to do that, we're just going to come up here, we'll say keys. I'll create our keys function, which will create a list of keys, and then we'll do a for each loop on the keys. We'll click that in there. We'll do that. That's the array element. It's coming back. And then from here, all we have to then do is, as we're going through, we'll say find. And we're just finding that key. So once we have that, I'm going to hit compile and save while we move things over. So from here, we're going to go ahead and create that subcomponent widget. So we'll go and say create widget, and we're going to go ahead and select our tracks and exposing the two pieces of data that we need in there. So first off, I'm just going to go and put the ID in there, and then I'll put the structure in there. So that will link it up. So that satisfies the incoming arguments. And then once we get this, we'll want to then say come out and add this. Actually, we want to add this to the tracks. So we'll come out, get tracks, and we'll say add. Add child. The child that we're adding is going to be this guy. And just hook up the execution line. And then from here, we need to add that dispatch event. So we'll come out and we'll say there it is. Bind event. So this is the event that we want to bind to. So when this button gets created, we then want to bind our an event, a custom event that we're going to create, so that when that button gets clicked, we can then process it on the screen here, which has So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say this. We'll go ahead and add custom events. Give it a name, on music selected. Then from here, we'll just go ahead and reference our music component again. So there's our music system. From here, we'll say set we'll set the playlist ID just in case it has been set to something else. And that playlist ID is going to be the same one here. And then we're going to go ahead and then tell it to play. So we'll come out, actually we'll just come off here and we'll say and then just hook that up. So that's the track that we want to play. So we'll compile and save. Now we've got our screen, we've got our subcomponents, and it's all hooked up. So next up, let's go ahead and create an input so that when we click on the keyboard, we can go ahead and open up the screen. So in previous tutorials, I used the debug key, but for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and create a custom input. So what we'll do is we'll come up here to the content drawer, we'll go into third person, go into inputs, actions, and we're going to create a new input action. So from here, we're going to right click and go to input, create a new input action. We'll say IA music, keep it simple, and we'll open it up. So one of the things we did in the demo, which I showed you earlier, was that we paused the game. But what I want to do is I want to create it so if I tap the key, it'll pause it and open up the screen. But if I tap the key again, it'll unpause it and allow us to replay. So in order for any inputs to be still usable after the game has been paused, we need to set trigger when paused to true. Since this is just going to be a simple tap, we can keep this as a digital boolean. We don't really need anything else here. So we'll go ahead, save, make sure trigger when paused is set to true, and then that's all we need to do there. Next, let's go ahead and add this to our default mappings. So we'll open that up. We'll open up our mappings. We'll come up, add another action mapping. There's our music. And for this one, I'm just going to go and set it to the M key. So I'm just going to click on that, hit the M, and it's gone ahead and saved. And that is, I think, all we need to do there. So we've we've got ourselves an action mapping. We've mapped that action mapping to our map settings in the default. And so now let's go ahead and tie this into the game. So I'm going to do this through the third-person character blueprint. So what we'll do is we'll come up to the content drawer, we'll open up third-person character, blueprints, and we'll go ahead and just open this up. So for this, I don't need these 3 events, but I'll just keep those up there. So let's go ahead and find the action mapping. So what we want is this one, IA music. I'm just going to open this up. So I'm just going to, since this is just a tap key, I'm just going to put it on start, and we'll trigger this off the start instead of off triggered. So let's go ahead, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this up. I'm going to do an is valid. And we'll use the macro version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the widget and then create a variable and then check to see if the variable's there. So what I'll do is if this is not valid, we'll say create widget. So this is where we'll actually create the widget. I'm going to set this to music, which is our, and I'm just going to drag off here and I'm going to say promote to variable, which is that, and we'll say music widget ref. And then we can bring this back, say get, so that makes more sense. So we'll check to see if this is valid, if this has been created before. If it hasn't been created, then we'll go ahead and create it. If it hasn't, if it has been created, then we'll just continue to move on through. So if it is valid, or if we had to create it, we'll come over here and then we'll say, I'm going to run a branch, and on this branch, I'm going to run it is game paused. So this is going to test to see if the game is already paused. So we'll put that in there. So both of these branches will come into the branch. We'll do our test. So if the game is not paused, or is, well, let's put it this way, if the game is paused, we'll start with the true. So we'll come over to our music widget and we'll say get. So if the game is paused, we're going to say, that means the widget's up. So we're going to say remove from parent. And we'll hook that up there like that. And I'll just add a little reroute node to make it look a little bit cleaner in what we're doing. So we'll say remove from parent. Then we'll say set game pause, and we'll set game pause to false. That will then unpause the game. And then the next thing we'll need to do is we need to use the controller to set the input modes on the screen. So say get player controller. There it is. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to say show mouse cursor. So we'll go ahead and set that to false. So we want the cursor to go away. And from there we're going to say, we're going to come off here and we'll say set to game only. So this should set our input mode to game only. And I'll just go ahead and add a reroute node since we'll be using this on the reverse. So we'll hit compile, save. So now on the false, the game is not paused. So if it's not paused, then we're going to add to viewport. We'll put that one right there, and we'll go ahead and put a little reroute node. Well, we'll bring this down a little bit more. Then we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to say set game. We're going to tell it to pause the game if we're coming down this branch. And I'm just going to copy this guy as well. Hook that into the target. We're going to show the mouse cursor. And then finally, we'll then set the input mode to game and UI. That one right there. And then we'll just go ahead and grab our widget again, get the widget as the reference, and we'll just slot that right in there. All right, so that should be everything that we need to do. So the last thing I'm just going to do is just a little housekeeping. I'm just going to move this off to the side. I'm going to then come up here. I'm going to go open level in Blueprint. Bring you back. So in the last video we just kept this as test sound, so I'm just going to move this back to using the default again. So come back here and we'll use this playlist. I'll keep it shuffle playlist. We'll keep it, let it randomly pick. Save, compile, and if everything is hooked up right, everything should work. So let's give it a test. So we're going to go hit play. Alright, music's randomly playing. Gonna hit the M key. There we go. And there it is. And everything is working. We can change based on what we decided. And that's it. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial series. Thank you for watching, and if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks. Bye-bye.